Hello, you've reached my review for Piranha 2: The Spawning. Now, originally I was going to do this one a couple of weeks ago. Unlike with the previous 3 reviews I've done for this series where I've gone out and bought a Blu-ray, for this one I decided to rent it because I thought to myself, flying piranhas this time? I'm not sure that's going to be that good. So I decided to rent rather than buy. But when I sat down to watch it, I realised that on Prime at least, the film is letterboxed. I mean, I've got this massive TV, but on Prime it's just kind of shrunken down into the middle of the screen somewhat. I mean, I watched it anyway because I'd spent money on it by that point, but certainly I think my viewing pleasure was reduced a little bit. So I thought to myself, you know what, I'm just going to go out and buy the Blu-ray. I've got the Blu-rays for the other films in the series anyway. I'm going to give this film the best possible chance to get a decent review. So that's what I did. So I waited for the Blu-ray to turn up, watched it a second time, and it was a lot better on the full 65 inches as it is on my TV. Now, a couple of interesting things before we get into talking about the film. Firstly, this was James Cameron's first ever film that he directed. I mean, you can't tell. It's not like you sit and watch this and think to yourself, oh, look at the way he set that scene up. That's vintage Cameron. You can tell the early talent right there. No, he tries to do nothing spectacular with this. He just wanted to cut his teeth here and get something on his resume, tell a competent enough story and move on. When I was on eBay though, looking for a Blu-ray to buy, I noticed that there's another version of the film where on the front they've got written, from the guy who brought you Titanic and Avatar, you know, as if you can compare Piranha 2 to those big £400 million watery blockbusters. I'm glad that my version doesn't have that on the front. Here is my version, by the way. Came with a very nice poster, as you can see. Now, the other thing to note is the fact that this film has a different title on the box than it does on the main menu of the Blu-ray and the film when you then play it. So on the box, it's got Piranha 2: The Spawning, but when you boot the film up, it's called Piranha 2: Flying Killers. I think I do prefer the Flying Killers one. It just fits into the kind of cheesy nature of this series, I think. And I'm guessing they went for the Spawning where they could because they didn't want to frighten people off if they thought they wouldn't watch a film about flying piranhas. Maybe, I don't know. Now, the story for this is largely unconnected to the first film. The 2 main leads from Piranha 1 do not return, which is, I'm very sad about that because I really enjoyed their chemistry in the first movie. And that big ending that was teased at the end of the first film, where the piranhas sort of get out into the west coast of America, we don't really get that in the second one because we're in Barbados now. We're a long way from there. The only connection between the 2 films really is the fact that in both cases the military are responsible for the mutated fish getting out and causing mayhem. This time it's a ship and the Navy people or the Army people on it who have been messing around with genetics, but the ship has sunk near a holiday resort in Barbados, and that's when the fish have escaped and gone out to terrorize everybody. We never really find out whether the ship sunk because of the piranha, maybe they started flying around and killing all the people on board, or whether the ship sunk because of some other unlucky circumstance. We don't get the details. I'm guessing Cameron probably at least fantasized about doing a big dramatic flashback with all the compartments flooding and stuff, but we don't get anything like that. There's just no budget for it. So once we get into the film, it's down to a local scuba diving instructor and her husband, a local cop, to try and save the day. So if we start with the positives, visually this film is a real treat to look at. I mean, how can a film not look great when it's set in Barbados? Got this great hotel, you've got women sunbathing, great beaches, golden waters. Actually, I'd say that the sea looks more kind of blue. If I was going to be a bit more accurate, I think I just went for golden to be kind of poetic. It's kind of that colour, the sea, actually, but it looks good. This whole film is quite stunning to look at for the most part. There is one really weird scene where the main final girl, Anne, and her son, they're sat in their hotel room about 15 floors off the ground, and they're having breakfast next to the window, and through this window you can see the most stunning view of the surrounding bay. I mean, it's to die for. It's incredible. But I swear, one of the first lines out of this kid's mouth is, "Oh, I can't stay in this hotel any longer. It's the pits." thinking to myself, are you serious? What is your idea of a good hotel? If I stayed in this hotel personally, I would not get bored of it in 200 years, but that's just me. So just a little character moment there, which bugged me a little bit. The piranhas in this film look really good as well. If you're worried that you're going to be able to see like loads of string holding the piranha up as they're sort of flying around, I couldn't personally see anything like that. And it's not like the whole film is full of flying piranha anyway. I mean, I know it's called Flying Killers for one of its titles, but there's still more piranha stuff in the water than there is over water. I mean, the film starts off with a big set piece under the water, it finishes off under the water. The only time the piranhas fly is when they can't get to a victim, which happens now and again, but this is still mostly an underwater film in terms of the piranha attack, so that might sort of quell the fears of some people going into this. From an acting standpoint, Lance Henrikson plays the main cop. He definitely adds an air of credibility to this film with his presence, although the rest of the cast are nowhere near on his level. The main final girl, Anne, she's played by a woman whose name I can't remember right now. She looks a little bit like another actress called Adrienne Barbeau, I think her name is. I'm thinking of the woman from The Fog, but she's not as good as her. And the rest of the cast are anything from mediocre to poor. They're not very good. There are a few smaller parts which are played by women who are just there because they're willing to get their tits out. And on that subject, actually, I think we're meant to be impressed by all the tits in this film, but some of the women, they've got like different coloured breasts to the rest of their body because they've been in the sun too long. I'm not really a big fan of that look. I mean, I'm not saying that it would be a deal breaker for me if I was getting down and dirty with a model in Barbados. I mean, I wouldn't be like, whoa, you better put your clothes back on and stay out of the sun for a week and then we'll get back to this little game of ours. No, I wouldn't be like that at all, but I definitely prefer it when women have the same skin tone all over their body. While we're on the subject of all things titillation, this film starts off with a sequence which I can't make my mind up whether it's insanely funny or just completely stupid. I'm going to call it a positive, just because it did entertain me. So these two divers go down to the military ship. These are the first two kills in the movie. Now this wreck must be a good 200 yards below the surface of the water, and yet when these two get down there, they start stripping off and getting down and dirty with each other. They take their goggle things off and start locking lips and stuff, and I'm thinking, what? How are you doing this? This is like so far under the water, you couldn't possibly enjoy it. You've got so much weight on top of you. I mean, I cannot imagine for a second that it's possible to get any enjoyment out of that at that depth, you know, for more than about 3 seconds. It's a little bit silly. That would be awkward, even if you were like 1 yard below the surface. Anyway, the piranhas come along and kill them, but it's a really cheesy, silly moment, which just made me think, is that possible? So if I jump forward to the very end of the film, that's where you'll find my favourite sequence of all. It is the climax, and I'm going into spoiler territory now. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm jumping right in there. So there's a couple of characters who have to go back to the wreck on the seabed. I forget the reasons why. But once they're inside this wreck, there's a really scary game of cat and mouse with the piranha. There's all these ducts and tunnels and rooms inside the ship, and we're not quite sure if the piranha are going to find which part of the ship that the characters are in. It's really, really good. It's actually a better ending than the ending from Piranha 1. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still prefer the first film overall. I'm not going to keep you in suspense about that. So I think that just about brings me to the end of my list of positives. I'll just throw one more in, actually. There's a really good kill about halfway through the film where this woman is performing an autopsy on a dead body and a piranha just flies out of the meat sack and gets her in the neck, and the practical effects there are actually pretty impressive. And I didn't expect this kill at all, because I think this is the first time in the movie that a piranha fish flies, so I'd probably forgotten by this point that they could do that, or, you know, were going to do that eventually in this film. So I've got to give the film credit, it did get me with that one. It was a bit of a jump scare that worked on me. So now onto my negative section, and I thought we'd have a change of scenery for this, so I've flipped the poster around. It does have another side, and I actually think I prefer this side of the poster. It's just got more going on in it. So my biggest complaints about this film mostly revolve around the actual spawning. This isn't just a random word thrown into the title because it sounds cool. The spawning is an actual piece of entertainment put on by the hotel in this film, whereby guests are encouraged to go down to the beach where they can observe some kind of ritual that these fish perform when they come out onto the beach at a certain time of night, or maybe it's a bunch of turtles. I can't remember. What I do remember is that when I was watching the film, this whole thing sounded boring as shit to me. I mean, if I was staying at the hotel in this film, screw the spawning. I would be going to the bar instead on a night time and watching a band, or I'd be going and sitting by the pool drinking pina coladas. I would not be going down to the beach to watch the mating ritual of the Barbados pelican or whatever it's meant to be. The manager of the hotel who encourages the guests to go on this thing, he's one of those annoying people who just puts profits before people's lives. When he's warned about the impending piranha attack, he's like, close down, are you crazy? I'm so sick of that trope in these types of films. It was cool in the first Jaws film, but by the time it got to Jaws 2, it was boring. It was tiresome when Dick Miller's character did it in the first Piranha film. It's tiresome here. I would just like to see, for a change, you know, a hotel owner or resort owner with a conscience. You know, I mean, it might not lead to some good drama, but we don't need some good drama with a complete prick of a hotel owner. Now, the only other thing I'll mention when it comes to the spawning is the fact that once the piranhas turn up instead of what was supposed to turn up, and people start dying all over the place and women are going, ah, there's this one guy, he's one of the main characters as well. Instead of run to the safety of the hotel like everybody else, he just stands on the sand and starts playing dodgeball with the piranha. So they're flying at him, trying to get into his neck or his face, and he's like, and one goes by him that way, then he's like, I'm thinking, okay, nicely dodged, but what is your long-term strategy for getting out of this situation? You're not Captain America, you can't do this all night. What are you going to do to get out of this? Eventually, one is going to hit you in the face. That is exactly what happens, and this guy gets taken out. My next negative would be the soundtrack. There's some really bad music in this film. It's especially unforgivable in a movie which for the most part takes place in a holiday resort with people partying. There should be some good music and there just isn't. There's not a single musical thing in Piranha 2 which appealed to my musical ear at all. My next moan would be the sheer amount of side characters and subplots which lead nowhere, which are just there to try and put on a little bit of comedy for us, but they just fall completely flat. I think this film was trying to follow on from the kind of Caddyshack vibe, but it's just not on that level when it comes to the writing, and a lot of these kind of situational comedy beats just end up feeling like bad episodes of Love Boat. And that brings me on to my final criticism, which is just the fact that the film is a little bit tedious for lengthy stretches in the middle. I felt this both times I was watching the film. It feels like there's a big vacuum of empty space in the middle. I mean, it starts well and it ends well, but there's all kinds of characters that I don't enjoy, doing things in the middle of the film that I don't enjoy. And like I said, subplots that go nowhere. Police investigational stuff that just takes its time to get going, and it's just, this film's 95 minutes. I think it could have been chopped down to 85, just cut 10 minutes of the crap out and it would have been a little bit better, a little bit tighter. So if I'm going to conclude then, as you probably guessed, this is a very mixed film for me. And I say that as somebody who is a big fan of this particular subgenre. I do like aquatic horror films. I've got something of a little collection building up now of shark films, crocodile films, piranha films. But I definitely prefer the first film done by Joe Dante. I wouldn't recommend this film if you don't have a particularly long history of watching this type of horror film. If you're curious about the Piranha franchise, I would definitely start with that original film from '78. And then go from there and see what you think of that one, and then maybe come to this one second. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and see what score we have for it. We have 1, 2, 2.5 bloody axes out of 5 for Piranha 2 The Spawning, or if you like, Piranha 2 Flying Killers. That is 1 whole axe down from the 3.5 score which I gave to the '78 version. Now then, that brings us almost to the end of our Piranha series. We have one more film. It's from 1995. It stars Mila Kunis, bizarrely, in one of her early roles. I believe it's meant to be just a kind of made-for-TV remake of the 78 version. It even uses some of the same effects, so I've read about. I'm going to try and get hold of a copy of that film and do a review for it, and that will be my final one in this particular franchise, and then we'll do a ranking. So I'll be back soon for that movie very shortly. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.